into motocross? Well, way back when my brother and I, we were always into bicycles. We were real young, learned how to fix them, build them, break them, you name it. So like the next step was, of course, motorcycles. I think that's the same story that most of us are always going through. And it took quite a while, but we finally convinced my dad to get us this. It ended up being a Yamaha RD60 street bike. That's what we learned how to ride on. And he was more into BMX at the time. I was into riding that damn Yamaha. So I learned a lot, shifting, gas, brake, you name it. That's how I learned to ride. And I got my first real bike a year later. It was actually a leftover 1982 Can-Am 125 qualifier. Tried a junior enduro with some of my friends because we all kind of trail rode at the time, and I think I was the only one of them that did an hour out of the race. But the thing is I didn't particularly like racing against time. I like the thought of getting on a line and racing against everybody else on that line, and you don't have that in the enduros, at least not back then. It was an experience that I don't think I want to do again, or I should say that I didn't want to do again. So later that fall, we tried a hare scramble down in Plimpton, Mass, and that was a blast. But again, it was the woods stuff. I'm not a very confident or strong woods rider. It was always something that was fun to do, with my buddies and stuff like that. But when you're going flat out through the trails and the woods, racing everybody else, it kind of got intimidating. So tried one of those. My dad and I went to a couple of motocross races that summer. We went and watched Southwick at a local race. We went down to Middleborough because that was closer to our home to watch some friends who were experts, and just absolutely fell in love with the thought, the idea, the atmosphere of motocross. It was just an amazing experience to see. And right then I said, this is it. This is what I want to do. Over the winter, we picked up a used 1983 KX 125. That following spring in 1984, I started racing motocross at Middleborough, Mass. It was just, natural progression of trying a couple of different disciplines and finally settling on the one that I really liked. And from that point on, I did very little woods racing, and my focus was almost completely on motocross. My first experience at the races, it was intense. 1984, Middleborough, during the spring. There was what we started at the end of March, so it happened to be one of those days where it was like 70 degrees out. It was just a one-off type of deal. It was just beautiful weather, really warm. My dad and I took my KX in the back of his pickup truck and headed down to Middleborough. My brother and my mom were off racing BMX somewhere else, so it was just the two of us. As soon as we got to the track, my dad, who was kind of like a social, I'm going to call him a social butterfly, he would just disappear and go talk to people. So I was kind of like on my own. I had one friend that was there with his dad, who was also his first race. So it was pretty cool to be there with a friend doing it. But anyway, we got it all said and done. Got out to practice, road practice. There was 3 heats of 125 novices that day. Rode my first qualifier. Now, there had to be probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 125 novices that day. And they took, I want to say maybe 15 tops, 14, 15 to go to the motos. So of course, with that many qualifiers, we were the first race out. I came off of practice, basically got the mud scraped off my bike and lined up for my first qualifier. And I didn't do so good. I think I was somewhere around 19 or 20, but I did not make the cut. and I was pretty dejected. I got back to the truck. All of a sudden, my dad appears from wherever he was, talking to whoever the heck he was talking to. He could tell I was a little bit bummed out, and he had said to me, take off your gear, and I want to go introduce you to somebody. So I changed, got cleaned up, went off with him, and he brought me up to the fence where there was a couple of guys standing. No idea who they were. And he says, I want you to meet somebody. All right. Turn around, and he says, Jim, this is JoJo Keller. And JoJo, typical JoJo fashion, looks at me. He's like, hey, buddy. Oh, you didn't do so hot in that race. You know what? I watched you. I watched the whole race. Kid, you look good. I think you should stick with it. You're going to make it. You're going to make it. I looked at my dad like, how does he know this? I mean, how do you know him, first of all? And how does he know this? You know, it's like, this is my very first race. I did crappy. I felt like I rode like a total nerd. I was nervous. I was actually glad to get it out of the way, the race out of the way. I was bummed I didn't make it, but I was glad that I got that first gate drop out of the way. And you know, quite honestly, when you first start going through that stuff, you're like, do I even want to do this? You know, was this a mistake trying to do it? But I just knew I loved racing my dirt bike. It was cool. Now when I think back on it, it's really cool to think about how things evolved from there. I went back the next week. There was only 2 qualifiers. They took a couple more people. I believe they took like 18 in each qualifier. I finished 11th. I made it. I was happy. I started racing. The competition that year, I didn't know what to expect. I just knew from going to the track as we got more into it, we would watch the experts. It was a mini national back then. Every single week, it seemed like, you know, there was so many guys on the line, and mind you, this is in NESC because I grew up in southeastern Mass, so there was so many guys that could finish in the top 20 in a national, qualify for and finish in the top 20. It was ridiculous, the depth of talent that was on a starting gate back then. So the bleachers were packed, the fences were lined, and we went out there. And I mean, from day one, when I started really getting bit by the motocross bug, my dream was to just become one of those guys. I wanted to be one of the boys, the white plates, the experts. And it kind of took off from there. Even in our classes, I mean, one of the biggest things I remember with the novice class is the depth of talent that you were racing against at that level. It seemed like there was almost a full gate every single time you went down to the line. And it took me a good solid half of a season before I could start placing even in the top 5, earning promotional points. From that point on, it was towards the end of the year that I actually earned the 20 points, and I moved up to the amateur class, or as now everybody calls it, the B class. And all of a sudden, you know, it was almost like, okay, this is real life. You just went from winning these 4-lap motos to 15 minutes plus 2 with some of the fastest dudes around, and you're getting lapped, you know. I didn't get lapped too much in the novice races, but once the amateur class came around, that was the initial goal. Don't get lapped. I think by the end of 84, I had finished a moto and didn't get lapped, and it felt like the biggest victory in the world. So from there, we started on next year's season. I had swapped over, got a brand new KTM 125. I was working at Cliff Cycles. That's what they sold. I put new bikes together as a job. Learned a lot that year. That was probably one of the biggest learning years of all the years that I've been riding and racing motorcycles, because you learned how to ride the bike, how to really push yourself and get into longer motors. You learned about endurance, the things that you needed to do. It was just a fun season. I didn't really place. I very hard to make the top 10 because there was some serious talent coming through back then. But by the last race of the year, the way that they split it up, they had spring series, fall series. So the spring series, I probably was somewhere around 15th to 20th place in most of the motos. In the fall series, I bumped that up. I was like 10th to 15th place. Now, at the end of the season, the guy that had won the 125 Amateur Fall Series that year happened to be his dad, and my dad happened to be good friends. He had wrapped it up a week early, and his dad said to my dad, "Hey, why don't you let Jim ride Ed's Kawasaki?" Um, we of course jumped on it, tried it out, and let me tell you, I went from barely breaking the top 10, if I did, to I think 2-2 moto scores that day. And as soon as I got off the track, my dad was there with the biggest smile, and he's like, "That's it. We're going green again, and you're staying on green." So, I mean, for the most part, that was I was a Kawasaki rider for most of my years, other than the stint on a KTM that one season. But it was just such a blast to be out there. Some of those amateur races were the best races that I had so much fun. There was so many friends that were made, even people that are friends till today. The competition, we were all kids back then. You didn't know who was going to succeed, who was going to quit. You had no idea what the level of talent was like. I'll give you an example. In the fall of 1986, there was a bunch of us in the 125 amateur class. We were all running the top five, winning motos, racing each other hard. There was Todd Rashad, and I don't know if a lot of you guys know Todd Rashad. Todd Rashad is one of the he has just come back to racing in the last few years, and he's one of the top 50 plus guys at Loretta Lynn's the last couple of years. In fact, a year ago, he did it on a 125 and drove some of those guys on 450s nuts. But the Rocket, that's his nickname, he was fast. He was in the mix. I know all you guys know Doug Henry. Well, Doug Henry was in that series. He finished second to Todd. But that's kind of what it was like back then. We were just all a bunch of kids. We'd hang out together on the weekends. Everybody got along with each other. Some of us were closer with as friends than others were, and some of those friendships still they last to today. I mean, just seeing Doug at the track and seeing Todd at the track, we always say hello. We always stop and talk and smile a little bit, maybe talk about what happened back 30-ish years ago, and just it's always fun. Lifelong friendships, no matter where we came from, no matter how we did or how far we went, and we know Doug went to the top, so it's pretty cool to have people like that as part of your racing history that you're still friendly with today. I was a top five guy for a couple of years in the expert class in New England, but I think my greatest achievement racing motocross probably was meeting and exceeding any goals or dreams I had for myself from the beginning. And I know that sounds kind of vague and kind of broad, but let me explain. I wanted to be one of those guys with the white plates. Well, I earned that. It took me 2.5 years after I turned amateur to get those white plates. So in the fall of 1987, I became an expert and chased the 125 Expert Series points. I was also one of those guys that did better as an expert than I did as an amateur because, that's my focus. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be that guy with the white plate. I started riding harder, and I actually broke the top 10 in 1987 in the fall series and finished 10th in the 125 experts. But when it comes to achievements, I had a few 250 rides that year, and I jumped up to a 250 because I was kind of big. I got my pro license for 1988, and I qualified for the very first national that I tried to race, which was the 1988 Southwick 250 National. And as a lot of you guys know, the 250 class back then was the premier class, what the 450 class is now. So to make it was pretty cool. But for me, the best part of the whole situation was I didn't have very high expectations going into the day. I mean, let's face it, I was a kid who it was less than a year of experience under my belt with the white plates. I was doing better, getting stronger, changing to a bigger bike, and I went into the qualifier nervous as hell. There's a picture of me floating around online somewhere where I'm lined up next to Bob Hanna, and to be on the gate with all these guys that you've only ridden, I mean, that you've only read about in magazines and you've never actually seen in person. Yeah, butterflies to say the least. I got a crummy start in my qualifier. I didn't make it. I was kind of nervous, just a lot of things shaken down. And got back. I don't know what clicked inside me, but I went into the last chance qualifier, got on the gate, came out of the hole in second. And me and this dude from California just absolutely kicked it up. It was like I found another gear. That's one of those light switch type moments. And it makes you really recognize, what it takes to ride at that speed. The respect that you have for those guys all of a sudden just increases. For me, it increased probably tenfold because now I'm on the track with them and I'm riding harder and faster than I ever had before, which was just simply amazing. So needless to say, there was only a little bit separating the two of us at the finish line, but we checked out from the field and we ended up both going to the main motos. And I think making your first national in the premier class is probably, I feel, one of my greatest achievements and one of my favorite memories. I mean, the next thing, follow that up with the parade lap of that race when you're at your local track and you're doing your parade lap and all you can see is friendly faces and people that you've grown up with on the fences yelling and screaming and cheering for you as you go by. And let me tell you, you can hear every voice, everything. You can hear everything. You're only in like second gear putting around. You can hear them. You can see them. It's pretty cool feeling when that happens. I did go on to race with a pro license from 1988 to 1992. I made it to five nationals at Southwick. I qualified for them. When I talked about going out and doing different ones, she said, well, think about what you got to do. You work a 40-hour plus a week job. You're paying for your own racing. How much are you willing to give up and sacrifice? What are your goals and your dreams? Do you want to be a big fish in a little pond or a little fish in a big pond? And it kind of stuck home. It's corny, but you know what? When your mom says stuff like that to you, you start thinking about it. I was enjoying racing at the local levels, and I really didn't have the drive and the desire that some of the other guys had to get out and do different things. I enjoyed a couple of times. I got over to Binghamton. I raced over there. That was a blast. That was in 1987. I rode a 125 Pro-Am class just before the Binghamton National that year. I've gotten to do a couple of different things. I went to Gatorback down in Gainesville and did the Mini Olympics that fall as well and rode the 125A class down there. That was so much fun. But I didn't really have those aspirations to go out and try to chase national glory and whatever because I knew that, this was pretty much where I belonged on the local level and just was having a blast doing it. It was fun. It was always fun. I actually qualified for my local race at Southwick all 5 years in the 250 class. I did try to ride the 500 national at Unadilla later in 1990, and that didn't quite go so well. Plenty of speed, rode strong. Unfortunately, me and the bike ended up meeting the ground numerous times, whether it was my own fault or somebody else's fault. Just a small collision or something. It was rainy and muddy that day, and even Dowdy walked up to me one time and he looked at me and he's like, Jimbo, what are you doing? You have plenty of speed. You should be in the motos by now. I said, I don't know what it is. I just don't have it today. I just keep hitting the dirt, you know, and um, one of my close friends, and still to this day, we ride mountain bikes together. Ted Blackman, he won the last chance qualifier in a KTM, and made the motos. So that was always something that um, that kind of got to me. Well, you know, that was like a biggest regret, knowing that, you know, one of my training friends, my riding partners made it and I didn't. That sat with me for a long time until this past season when I actually had taken a bike I built, um, an 89 KX 250, you know, nonetheless, to Unadilla and rode Rewind because I wanted another shot. I had never been back on the track at Unadilla. Been to many races there as a spectator in between, hanging out in the pits, you name it, but never back on the track until this year. And it was so cool. And yeah, that came from that weekend. It was in the 50 plus disc brake class, but you know what? It didn't matter because taking a checkered flag at Unadilla, I didn't care what class it was in. It was just super cool. It was one of the most amazing feelings to go back that many years later, and yeah, at 52 years old, and it felt like I was closing a chapter that I had left unfinished. So that was super cool. Um, Motocross has helped me. I was a shy kid, so being able to put my helmet on and goggles and kind of hide away from um, the things that I didn't like to face, you know, social situations and people. Um, Becoming popular in motocross as I came up through the ranks forced me to come out of hiding and talk to people, and you know, kids walking up to you when you're at an event. For me, I'm a no-name three-digit rider, but kids don't care. They just want to talk to you. They look at you and they idolize you, which is something that I would highly encourage any young pro today. Doesn't matter how good you are. If a young kid comes up and talks to you, talk to them. If they ask you for an autograph, give it to them. We were at Foxborough at the Foxborough Supercross in '90. Two friends of mine and all three of us riding. I had two little kids walk up and ask for our autographs. And the two of them looked at each other and were kind of like, whoa, you don't want mine. I'm not that good. And I'm like, no, come here, give it to me. And I just reached down and I made sure I signed it for them. But it's like, you want to talk to those kids. You're the guys that they're looking up to. You're the local pros. Yes, they look up to the factory guys. But you know what? They look up to you too. And just being someone who had come through the ranks and had to force myself out from being shy and being in that kind of, you know, I don't want to say repressed, but you're kind of, that was me. I didn't talk to people. I did my own thing. I was always, you know, one of those guys that focused on what I wanted to do, and that was it, and shied away from everything else. And motocross put me out into that. So I'm able to talk to people doing this, going online live, things like that. So that's one of the things motocross has helped me. It's the confidence you gain from motocross, the support from your friends in the community. Um, if you ever have a project or something that you aren't sure if you're going to be able to handle or tackle, you know you're going to get support from your friends in the motocross community, which that's priceless. That's absolutely priceless. It's probably one of the best things that motocross brings to the table for any of us, because it's not just through your racing years. It lasts pretty much your entire life, as long as you know you got good people behind you that share the same passion. um, the support and encouragement is absolutely huge. That's really what it's all about. What would I be doing if I wasn't racing motocross, or if I didn't race motocross? That's a tough one, because I feel my life has been about two wheels pretty much from the time that I was a little kid, even through today. If you guys follow me, you know that I'm getting deeper into mountain biking and all aspects of mountain biking. I've got my vintage motorcycle that I really absolutely love building and riding. I do have a modern bike now. My thoughts are probably going to be transitioning from that and getting into another build, because there's just something for me about building a bike and then displaying it by riding it on a track, that's just as much fun to me at this point in my life as it is trying to go out on a 450 and try to clear that 110-foot tabletop. That stuff doesn't interest me anymore. Building and displaying my work and riding it on a track, that's what I'm all about right now. But back to that question, if I didn't race motocross, I I was this close to pulling the trigger and trying to go to MMI when I got out of high school and working on bikes because I was in that two-wheel mode. And it just so happened at the time that's when I was really focusing on getting better racing. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take a couple of years off. I'm going to try this racing deal and see where it goes. It didn't go very far. Like I said, I was the guy that was staying around the local level, but I met my wife at the track. She was a sign-up girl. Met her in 1988, and everything in my life is a direct result of my motocross. Is probably an understatement. My wife, my family, everything I've got, I owe to being there and being in those positions in that motocross life, really. My career. A friend of mine back in 1985, after I graduated high school, riding buddy, racing friend, operated a car dealership. He needed some help at the dealership. Well, Cliffs was slowing down. I decided to go to work for him, do some part-time stuff, and that's 35 years later, I'm in the automotive business. I'm a parts manager at an Acura store up here near Boston, Mass. And I've done very well for myself and made a great career out of the automotive business, which wouldn't have happened had I not had my riding friend need some help at his dealership when I was a kid. But that's kind of where it was going to go. The plans were to go to MMI, but things kind of changed. Life got in the way. I met Marie, and we ended up chasing the New England points for a little while. Did a couple of things with the local nationals, and once we decided that we were going to get married, we got engaged in 1990, and we had our plans for our fall wedding in 92. So the plans were to race in the expert class and chase points through the spring series in 92, and then we got married. And back then it was not common to see guys with wives and kids going to the races and racing motocross all the time. It was just kind of a natural progression that you didn't really race as much and you didn't really chase the points, when you were working on starting your family. So we took that as the sign that, I was actually kind of burned out from chasing points, and it was refreshing to be able to do things on Sundays and not always have to pack up and be at the track. I still love riding. I still love racing. She was actually still working at a few of the tracks, so I was still around. I would ride once in a while. I would line up once in a while. It was just a blast to be able to finally do it on your terms, when you wanted, how you wanted. After that, our youngest son, Nicholas, was born probably a little over a year after we were married. And that's when we shifted our focus a little bit more towards that. That whole thought of MMI and wrenching on bikes kind of just never really came back. And that doesn't bother me one bit, because I'm extremely happy with the way everything's turned out since the gnarliest crash. What was the gnarliest crash I've ever experienced? Well, back the last real significant race that I did, not so much a fun race, but a significant race, I had come back to racing in 1999, bought a YZ250 off a friend, and was just playing around here and there, and had some success in the 30 plus A class. We stayed with it for the year 2000, and our friend down here his family owned a Husqvarna dealership, so we got a couple of Huskies that were support deals for 2001 and 2002. And in 2001, the local track down here, they only raced like once a month. So I had the Husky from the shop that was right up the street from the track, and I went out and I rode the vet class, and I ended up winning their vet championship. Only racing maybe 8 times that year, if that. Um, so it was just an absolute blast. And then got another bike in the spring of 2002. Um, we were same track. I don't know exactly what happened, but the bike reacted completely different off of one of the jumps that I hit than it did the lap or two before. And I remember felt like I was in a dream. It was almost a tabletop with a run out step down at the end. So if you didn't want to jump the whole thing, you could just jump the short table and then ride off the back. But most of us that were going fast were jumping the whole thing. And I remember coming up to it, and then it just felt like I was in a dream. And the next thing I know, I feel something prickling at my nose, and I'm waking up on a backboard with a neck brace, being taken to the ambulance. I did a quick check, and I realized that I had some pain in my shoulder. Um, Turned out I had hit this jump. The bike bottomed out completely on takeoff and just absolutely slingshotted me over the front of it. And I did a massive endo right in front of the spectators, my wife, my kids. It was pretty ugly, and I was out for a good amount of time. My helmet was broken in 3 places. Turns out my left collarbone here was broken in about 10 places. I had some disc issues with my neck. I broke my right wrist. I had all kinds of internal swelling, I guess they told me at the hospital, for my organs. So they actually kept me for 3 days after the ambulance ride. It wasn't a very good time. I figured at that point it was 2002. I'd started in 1984, and I had made it all those years, and that was my very first ambulance ride. Not my first broken bone. I had come home a couple of times, but driving home from the track with a bone that needed to be looked at by an orthopedic specialist. But that was the first time in an ambulance, and that was definitely the worst crash. Took 2 weeks out of work and realized, hey, you got a family to support. So I kind of stepped back, and that was the last serious race that I did. In fact, I still had motorcycles off and on, even, of course, you heal up and you want to get back on. But I did not want to race again. My kids were racing BMX at the time, and that became the focus on them and what they wanted to do. And it just was a natural type of progression. They went from BMX, they had motorcycles, they didn't want to race. After seeing that crash that day, they didn't want to race. And they kind of stuck with that thought. But they got into hockey, lacrosse, everything to take me away from motocross. And it wasn't until 2018 that I was dragged back out at the vet race at Southwick on a gate again. But that was it was enough to make me think about what was important to me at that particular time, and kind of change my priorities a little bit. To say it's been strange this year is an understatement. We had picked up the 89 KX250 last year, spent a few months building it, and the plans were to race a few ACR races. Race MX Rewind at Unadilla, but I also wanted to get to the ACR rounds if they were at Binghamton. I wanted to get to Central Village, Connecticut, because that's literally an hour from my house. I wanted to race the ACR round at Southwick, then the Southwick vet race. But I wanted to really focus on the vintage class at the vet race. Because, let's face it, riding these old bikes is just purely for fun, and that's all I really care about now is having a blast riding motorcycles, doing it the way I want to do it, to the levels I want to do it at. So COVID came in, everything shut down. I had ridden my bikes a couple of times in the spring, but with work restrictions and things like that, I spent a lot of time riding mountain bikes, and just developed a love for the bike, being out there with your friends in the woods. And we kept it small. We only had groups of a half a dozen or more riders, and just pedaling away and trying to drop some weight and get in shape. And once racing was going to open up, we would figure out what we wanted to do. Paul Goyette's series, the New York Off-Road Series, was the first one that really was doing anything. And I hadn't ridden a motorcycle through the woods in, gosh, 35 years maybe. As I said at the beginning, I'm a motocross rider. Me and trees really don't get along all that well at speed. But I decided to try it because there was nothing else going on, and it was fun. And Paul's an old friend. We had purchased a camper for the season, and we hadn't gotten to use it yet. So it was a great opportunity to go have some fun, go hang out with some of the guys I've been mountain biking with over the restriction period, and just get on a motorcycle again. And I had a blast that weekend. It really wasn't. It was in, I think, Melrose, New York. It was a fun race. I did okay. Dead engine start kind of killed me, but it just set the tone. It was so much fun and a great atmosphere to be in that I wanted to do another one. So 2 weeks later, for his third round, I went to Winchester. It was a live engine start on a motocross gate, much more to my liking, and I ended up hole-shotting both of the super senior motors. Actually led for a while and just had an absolute blast. That was fun. We didn't get to do too much after that. When our stuff started opening back up, the focus became shifting onto Rewind. And when was Rewind going to happen? Getting that KX, make sure that was ready. So we kind of didn't do too many more races until Rewind, when we went out to Dilla and just absolutely had the best weekend. To say it was one of the best weekends ever was an understatement. The forecast of rain that never hit us. It went around us. As they said at the track, 10 miles to the south, 10 miles to the north, it was downpouring, flash floods. Not any rain came through. We had a lot of times that there were clouds. After the races were over, on Saturday we had one quick rainstorm come through, but that was it for the whole weekend. And just the bikes, the people, the motos, that was definitely the highlight for me of 2020, was getting that MX Rewind weekend in, using the camper, having a blast, taking our dog with us. We don't normally take our dog with us, but she was with us the whole weekend. It was just awesome. Then coming back home, and I raced the Northeast Vet Championship at Southwick, again in the vintage class. Ended up going 2-2 that day in the vintage class. Just had an absolute blast. So 2020's been challenging, but I think you really have to sit back and everybody. It's easy for everybody to take a look at it and focus on the negatives, to focus on the restrictions, to focus on the way racing, turned out, and the lack of fans, the lack of spectators, you name it. The negatives are easy to talk about, but when you sit back and you think about the positives, I look at 2020 for me as a success because I was able to do things that I didn't plan on doing and that I haven't done in forever, in addition to going out and doing the biggest two events that were on my radar. So I think it went fantastic. Do I have any future goals? Those of you guys that follow me know that I started the Facebook group Old Men That Used to Race. That was kind of an off-the-wall type of thing that accidentally got super successful and super popular. I would like to address that group more and utilize my YouTube channel to record, film, and edit more videos showcasing some of the stuff that we do. And not just me, but some of the guys I ride with. I have a really fun group of guys that pedal with me that are all old dirt bike racers. I really want to utilize that to do more recording and editing on the vintage events and some of the places that we are. I'm also considering trying to do some Zoom stuff, one-on-one recording with different riders and just, conversations and seeing where that goes. I know it's not racing motocross, which is kind of more, I think where the question lies in motocross, but I'm almost 53, and I know that I've done pretty much everything I could have ever dreamed of really doing racing motocross. Any box that I had, um, something that I needed to check off, I have checked off on my motocross list. And if I can get out just a few times and ride here and there, race the events I want to race, stay healthy, um, keep my bikes together in one piece so I don't have to scour eBay looking for discontinued parts, build another bike. I want to build a last generation 03 to 07 KX250. I want to do another frame up build on one of those two strokes and just do it the way I want to do it. I want to put like a modern type of look plastic to it, but still have the two stroke and have that KX. I do love KXs, so that's kind of the direction I want to go with it, and have some fun when I line up at a track. Instead of feeling any pressure at all, I just want to be able to relax and have a good time with the guys that are doing the same thing as I am. And I mean, that's really what it's all about. It's just about being around your friends, your family, and having fun on two wheels, no matter whether you are gas powered, electric powered, pedal powered, two stroke, four stroke. I don't care. It's all about just having fun on two wheels, and really that's the goal at this point in my life. I do want to say thank you to Justin for asking me to come on and answer some questions, and give you guys a little bit about what's going on, who I am, how I got to where I was. And I'll tell you what, if it wasn't for motocross, I really don't know where I would be, what direction I would have taken in my life. I just, from being a kid and getting on, plastic toy motorcycles that you're supposed to just walk around with. My brother and I, there's a picture floating around the internet. My brother and I, with a couple of them, we would take them to the top of the hill and ride them down, just because we wanted to go faster. And from like that point on, it was just all about two wheels and just being as I say, a two-wheel life. So bicycles, motorcycles, it was just progression through the years. And now it's just, instead of trying to get rid of everything and forget about it and do something different, which I'm pretty sure most of us by this point in time have already done. I know I've tried to do it 2 or 3 times. I've tried to get rid of all my stuff and fight it. It's like I've decided that embracing two wheels and embracing the heritage that you've kind of built your life around is much better than not having it in your life. Because what you don't realize sometimes is it's not just the bikes, it's the people, the friendships, and just basically the whole lifestyle that you've become accustomed to is really much more than what people on the outside think it is. And it's not something that you can just walk away from if you truly have a passion for it. So embrace it, enjoy it, and get out and ride if you can. Thanks.